Play a few tunes while we get started. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Shebeen. If you're just joining us for the first time in our live stream, you're very welcome. We are going to have a bit of crack, a bit of chat about Irish whiskey tonight. If you're watching this as a replay, we hopefully will have had a good show by the time you come to watch this. So we are kicking off our first of our new weekly live streams with our live stream called the Shebeen. So the lock-in is dead. The Shebeen is now in its place. All right, we'll give folks a little chance to join before we get started. If you are tuning in with a glass of something in your hand, let us know what you're drinking. If there's a drop in your, drop of Irish whiskey that you poured for yourself, let us know what it is. Love to know what you're drinking. We are, there's Dave and Greg. How are you getting on? California and Florida, both coasts in the house. Brian Riley, very good, you're very welcome. Tonight we're going to share some news about Irish whiskey, what's going on in the world of Irish whiskey, what events are upcoming, what releases happened in the last week, and then every week we'll do the same thing. It won't be a 4-hour session, it'll be a session. We'll have a session nonetheless. And if you're joining us for the first time, you're very welcome. Very informal. We'll have a drop of something in our glass. We'll talk about the world of Irish whiskey. We'll talk about what's going on in the world of our whiskey club, some of our releases that are coming as well. We'll answer your questions. We'll hang out, and we'll do this every Sunday night, calendars permitting. And we'll enjoy Irish whiskey together. Stacey's joining with 2 stacks Polaris. Great stuff. Let me see. Amy's about to pour Glendalough 17. Very good. 2 stacks Polaris for Cheryl as well. Hey Jeff, how are you getting on? All right. New Jersey in the house. St. Louis in the house. Washington DC in the house. Ted's got the Craic in his glass. I've got a drop of the Craic here as well. I was sipping on it earlier. We're running out of the Craic. We can always make more Craic. We just can't bottle it all. I'm actually sipping now on Waterford whiskey Hunter, Heritage Hunter variety. So this is one of the most recent releases. Hunter Heritage variety from the Arcadian series. This is the old heritage grain. So Hunter is an old variety of heritage grain, and this is one single malt from one single farm from Tom Bryan in County Kilkenny. And it is the first of their heritage grains to have been brought back from the dead, almost the dead anyway. Hi to Jeff as well. Cheryl, how's Dermot? There's Renee. Hi Renee. How are you and Ron? Hope you're doing well. Enjoying retirement, hopefully. All right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to kick this off every Sunday evening, and we are going to take questions. Any questions about releases that have happened in the previous week. It's a really busy time in the world of Irish whiskey at the moment. Never has more happened in such a short space of time. We're now running into scenarios where there are 5-10 whiskey releases in a week. When I first started into the world of Irish whiskey back in 2016, if there was one new release a month, you got very excited. Now, there are events happening every single night of the week in Ireland. There are multiple clubs all over Ireland that meet up. There are clubs around the world like ours. There are releases happening non-stop. New distilleries are coming online. Distilleries that started in the last 3 to 6 years are starting to release their whiskies as well. So a lot happening. And so we want to capture it all. We want to try and report on it. We want to try and talk about it and find one place to do it. Something you can put in your calendar and say, Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern. We know that's going to be where we can recap the world of Irish whiskey. Or if we can't get it, we can watch the replay the following week. So that's the goal anyway. That is our goal. All right. We've got our music playing here, which could be annoying. All right. We throw that off there. All right. And if you are, so many familiar faces here. It's like, this is where all the cool kids hang out, it seems like. All right. So, music, let me see. Make sure I get all your comments there. All right. I'll check the comments as we go through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share tonight some of the whiskey news, some of the releases that have happened over the past week. And then we're going to talk about things that are happening in our whiskey club. We'll talk about some upcoming events. And then, yeah, that's it. We'll take some questions as we go. But there's so much going on, like I said, that it can be tough to keep up with it. So this is a chance for us to do it. So I'm going to keep collecting all the news during the week, and then we'll drop it all into our weekly Shebeen. So what's a Shebeen? The first question really is, what is a Shebeen? If you're joining us from Ireland, you know well what a Shebeen is. There's two spellings of it. Shebeen, Shebeen, the way I've spelled it online over the past week is the English spelling. There's no point in trying to teach you all the Irish language at this stage now, not after a few whiskies anyway. But it can also be spelled S-I-B-I, fada, which is like an accent over the I-N. That's the Irish spelling, Shebeen. And it's really anything "een" in Ireland means small. So it's almost like a small shed, a small little hut, a small little place to hang out. And shebeens are quite famous in Ireland, infamous in fact. And so you may have never been to a shebeen in Ireland, because mostly you need to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. But every town, every village in Ireland has a shebeen, and it's basically an unlicensed premises. There's more alcohol than you've ever seen in your life. It might be better decorated and kitted out than any pub you've been to in your life, but it doesn't have an alcohol license, and technically nothing's for sale, but it is for sale. But there's nothing stopping you as a homeowner kitting out a shed in your back garden with kegs of Guinness and taps and all the latest whiskey releases, and putting in flat screen TVs and sofas and leather couches and all kinds of things, and inviting your friends around to enjoy it. Nothing at all illegal about doing that. But when money starts to change hands, that's when it gets a bit dicey. So the shebeen is an unofficial pub, unlicensed. Money does change hands, but you have to be careful who you're taking money from, in case it's the local guard, the local policeman, and then you're done. But during COVID, it emerged just the sheer number of shebeens across the country, because pubs were shut down in Ireland for quite a while, 18 months more. And in that time, people had to find their own entertainment, and shebeens tended to be a source of entertainment around the country. And there were many raids took place during the COVID lockdown, and photographs shared on the newspapers, online, and on the radio, on the TV, showing us just how fancy shebeens have gotten. And yeah, it's almost like some of them were almost like they were kitted out by the drinks companies. You know, they'd all the Jameson posters, or they'd all the Guinness gear, and even the man behind the bar was wearing a t-shirt with his name on it, or the name of the shebeen. You know, very fancy altogether. So we're in a shebeen, kind of unofficial. I'm not taking any money from you, you know. So it's really just my house and your house, and we're having whiskey together. But that's what a shebeen is. So next time you go to Ireland, ask your Irish friend if they know where there is a shebeen anywhere. Sometimes it could be behind a curtain in a grocery store. A small little country town might have a small little shop, and there might be a curtain you pull back, and you might see a little kitchen in there, but you might see a spot out of the corner of your eye, the corner of a keg of Guinness. And if you follow your eyesight through to that keg of Guinness, you'll pretty quickly happen upon maybe a storeroom full of alcohol that leads to another hidden room. And anyway, they're out there. They're out there. You can find them. You can find them. All right. It's Tony. How are you getting on, Tony? Good to see you. Okay, so what we have had happen over the past week in the world of Irish whiskey, we're going to start with sharing some whiskey news. I'm going to walk through some of the whiskey releases so that you know what has dropped. Some of these will be available Ireland only. Some of them will find their way to the United States, but there's no point in us ignoring what's being released. I think it's better for me to talk about everything that's coming out, and then you can decide if you're going to move heaven and earth to ship it to wherever you are. And I know shipping can cost a lot from Ireland, but there's no point in not sharing what's happening in the world of Irish whiskey. So let us start with Dingle. So I was down in Dingle yesterday, down in Dingle last night, quick stop, flying visit. And Dingle Distillery released in the last week, just over a week ago, they released their Dingle Samhain. Samhain. So a lot of you were wondering, how do you pronounce that? Samhain. Samhain is kind of the harvest festival period in Ireland. They released a single malt whiskey, and it's the first in an 8-part series that's going to acknowledge and signify and commemorate and mark different seasons and different, I suppose, culturally important and originally maybe pagan festivals. And they play a big role in Irish culture. And certainly down in Dingle and in Kerry, they very much acknowledge and mark those parts of the year. So Samhain is the first release, and it is a non-age statement single malt, but it's aged in ex-bourbon barrels initially for an unspecified time, and then an extra 2 years in ex-muscatel casks. And muscatel is a sweet wine made from the muscat grape. So it's like a fortified wine, a sweet wine. 50.5% ABV, good healthy ABV on that there. €85 and 10,000 bottles globally. So that was released for Ireland only, and I think maybe the UK as well. It's not destined for the US immediately. 10,000 bottles destined for Irish market only. I tasted it last night. I have to say it's probably the best dingle I've tasted yet. I think they're evolving with every release. But I remember sampling this last night and thinking to myself, okay, that's a different dingle than anything I've ever tasted before. Rich, kind of creamy milk chocolate, wonderful balance of sweetness and spice. I think coming through from that muscatel cask, but it's a lovely, well-rounded whiskey. I could have drank it all night. I almost went back for a second one, but I was in a whiskey bar, in Dick Mack's bar in Dingle, and I thought, you can't repeat a whiskey there. You have to keep working your way through the shelf. It was my first whiskey of the night, and I could have happily drank it all night. So that's the first one that was released, or that we're going to mention. 50.5% ABV, good healthy ABV there. Nice to see those whiskies coming out at a higher ABV. Yeah, Mark, I'll tell you all the releases you can't get. You can get them if you want. There's people who know how to get them. It's a matter of how much do you want these, whether you'll ship it yourself. I know a lot of people manage to buy multiple bottles from Ireland at the same time to bring down the average cost of shipping, which once you get into the 2, 3, 4 bottles shipment, you can bring your price way down, your average price per bottle. But anyway, this Dingle Distillery Samhain single malt, I know some of you have ordered it already. Good for you. It's a really good whiskey. The best one I've tried now from Dingle. And I would say for me, it beats their core single malt release. So I'm excited to see what they come up with next. You know, obviously you got the likes of Dingle are evolving, and other distilleries who are, Dingle is now 10 years old, and that means their stock is getting older, or their available stock is getting older now. They're always mixing younger stock with older stock as they vat their single malts and their pot stills, but it means they have a greater range to play with. Plus, they're experimenting with different casks. They changed master distillers in the past 2 years. And so you're seeing some evolution in the spirit. I think it's a good thing. So that is the Dingle. Any guess at the age? I would say probably guessing 5 to 7 years. I'd say 5 to 7, I would guess. Interestingly enough, and I had this conversation with somebody during the week, we're at that stage now in Irish whiskey where the conversation is shifting from age to the quality of the spirit, because historically we didn't have access to very good 3-year-old whiskies, 4-year-old whiskies in Ireland. That's all changing. There's so many great whiskies that are of a younger age now, to where the conversation, I think I'm seeing it starting to shift, where less are we hearing the question up front, but how old is it? But how old is it? And more we're hearing, can I try it? Let me taste it. Let me understand it a bit, which I think is a great thing, because there's no reason why you can't have a fantastic 3-year-old whiskey or 4-year-old whiskey. It takes a lot of work, but they're out there, and there's more of them out there, which is a good thing. Steve's got Bushman's 12-year-old distillery reserve in his glass. Good stuff. This has been released, Troy. Yeah, it's out there. Now, I couldn't find a bottle of it in Dingle, would you believe, in the shops in Dingle, and they don't sell from the distillery in Dingle. But I couldn't pick up a bottle, so I have to order it online. There was nothing in Dingle itself. Super Value in Dingle is normally where you get the best releases. They didn't have it at all. They had the core release, but they didn't have Samhain. So I'll find it. I'll be getting myself a bottle. All right, next up, James Fox. So James Fox, many of you are familiar with James Fox, a retailer in Dublin. And like many retailers, like many bars, they are doing collaborations and collaborative releases. They've released a number of whiskies with different distilleries over the past few years. They have worked with Fercullen, which is the Powerscourt distillery, over the last few years as well. And they just released this week a single grain, a 15-year-old single grain distilled in 2006 by Noel Sweeney in the Cooley distillery. And all of the age stock in the Powerscourt distillery comes from Cooley, single malts and single grains. And they have released that at cask strength, 252 bottles, €150. Or if you are exporting it to the United States, if you order it, you don't have to pay the VAT, the value-added tax of 23%. So they back that out. So it's tax-free. Obviously, you have to add on then the expensive shipping. But that is released at James Fox. So for those of you who like single grains, and I know interest in single grain is growing all the time, then that's one to look out for. We don't hear a lot about Fercullen in the United States because they're not exporting to the United States yet. They haven't got the stock. They haven't had availability of stock to begin their US assault. They just released their first distillery only for Cullen, which is a younger whiskey, and I think we'll hear more from them, but it can be a little bit confusing. Powers Court Distillery is the name of the distillery, and then for Cullen is the name of the whiskey brand. The reason they can't call their whiskies Powers Court Distillery or Powers Court Whiskies is because of a not so infamous brand, a not so unknown brand known as Powers Irish Whiskey. Powers Irish Whiskey, way back when Powers Court Distillery was being set up, sent a little letter saying, that's awfully like our name, Powers Court Whiskey, Powers Whiskey. We think the similarities are too similar. We'd like you to change the name. And so they did. They didn't go out of the gate with Powers Court Whiskey. Instead, they went out with For Cullen. For Cullen. All right. It is a beautiful distillery, Amy. It's a beautiful part of the world. And Wicklow and the Powers Court estate are just beautiful. There's a beautiful waterfall there, stunning vistas, the hotel, cafe, and the distillery is a really nice addition. I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with over the next few years, actually, because Noel Sweeney started them off as master distiller. He set them up. He put the processes in place. He's now stepped away from the distillery, but what's in place now, I think, is looking pretty solid for the future. And I tried some of their whiskies at Whiskey Live in Dublin, and their new release. I'm trying to remember the name of their new release, but it's very promising. Yeah, very promising. The grounds are incredible, Brian. Yeah, absolutely. All right. For those of you who are part of the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, you'll have seen when we talked to Maurice O'Connell on our Meet the Maker event just this week, we were sharing the details of Maurice's upcoming release. So this is actually not being released until the 11th, if I'm not mistaken. November the 11th, from online retailers and some physical locations in Ireland. So the Lakeview Estate is the home of Wayward Irish Spirits, and they're known for the Liberator Irish whiskies. And back in 2018, Maurice, he's been growing barley on his fields for generations. They've been selling that barley to feed merchants for cattle feed. In 2018, they decided to sow distilling barley, and they had harvested that at the end of 2018. They then sent that to Great Northern Distillery, where it was distilled. And they did a 50-50 mix of malted barley and unmalted barley to create their pot still whiskey, which they then sent back down to Lakeview Estate, where it has been maturing in the maturation warehouse known as the House of Contentment, because it's full of whiskey. And that is right beside the field where the barley was grown. And so for the past 3.5 years, about 43 months now, 3.5 years, Maurice has been maturing the whiskey in a mixture of ex-bourbon casks for 3 months and then 40 months in ex-Premier Cru Bordeaux casks. 10% of it, interestingly, is in ex-peated casks for a month. So Maurice mentioned how when it got to about 36 months old, they thought that the nose and maybe the palate needed a little bit of rounding out. And so they took 10% of the spirit and they put it into casks that previously contained peated malt, and they left them there for a month, and they brought it back into the vatting of the pot still. And it does lend a lovely note to it. It's a remarkable spirit, and it's one of the great examples, actually, of when a young whiskey can taste remarkably good because of all the levers that are pulled and pushed the right way along that journey. You can rush a whiskey in 3 years, or you can have it take its time within 3 years, if that makes sense, by making lots of decisions along the way about distillation, about maturation, about barrel type, about recasking, about finishing, about vatting, and all of those decisions are going to affect that finished product. So Maurice's inaugural release, which is expensive, but it's the inaugural release. In other words, after this, the whiskey will come down in price. But for the first ever release from the estate, what's called a single estate, because it was grown there and matured there, the barrel, all the whiskey is made from barley from that estate, matured on site. That first release is at €195 a bottle. 300 bottles exist in the world. And it's a remarkably good whiskey. Remarkably, the flavor profiles coming through, just a small little hint of peat, wonderful cherry notes, dried strawberries, kind of dehydrated strawberry notes. Really is remarkable. Maurice was sharing how the maturation in that part of the world is really affecting the whiskey, and how in many parts of Ireland they might have a 7 or 8 month maturation period because temperatures have to be above 7 degrees Celsius. Where Morris he's got a 10.5 month maturation period because of the microclimate, which means his whiskey's having more interaction with the wood than whiskies in different parts of Ireland. So back to this concept of terroir and where something comes from, where something matures, place plays a role. Distillery plays a role, but the place, the thing that takes the longest to do is age, is mature. That certainly plays a big role in the whiskey making. So that is out in 4 or 5 days' time. Today's the 6th. It's out on the 11th. James Fox will sell it. Celtic Whiskey Shop will sell it. Irish Malts may have a small allocation as well. But it is, it's a remarkable whiskey for what it represents, which is another first in the world of Irish whiskey, which is somebody taking a chance, growing their own barley, sending it off for distillation, bringing it back to their farm and maturing it there. Now, there's others that have done that, like Tipperary Distillery have done it. There's one more has done it as well. But single estate, it's a first for Morris, and it's kind of the start of his journey into whiskey making, which will eventually lead to the building of a distillery on the banks of the lake, the banks of the lakes of Clarny, which is a good thing. Probably not enough peat for now, says Brian. Maybe not. I'm not a big cherry fan, but I know I recognize it when it's there, and I very much appreciate its balance in this whiskey. Not a big cherry fan though, generally. It's not peaty enough for me, Kristen. No, we need 110% peat now. I have another peated whiskey here. I'm going to move on to next to Waterford peated whiskey. Ballykeefe, Brian, you're right. Ballykeefe. Yeah, these are expensive. There's no doubt about it. These are expensive whiskies, and inaugural whiskies almost always are. Inaugural whiskies, I mean, you look at the Dingle inaugural whiskey, which was called Cask 2. Those are going for thousands and thousands of euros now if you find one on the market. But the inaugural is a collector's item, or it's for the real fans who want to taste a part of that first thing. Just like Killowen Distillery, they've got overheads as a small distillery, but they're also releasing something monumental, the first. There'll never be another first. So that's why they'll always command a bigger price. Whether those prices could be sustained is another question. I doubt they could. Teeling whiskey, it can be tough to keep up with Teeling because they have hundreds of different cask types in their warehouse. They are experimenting regularly with their older malt stock that they would have inherited, brought with them from Cooley Distillery, from Bushmills. They have old age stock, a lot of ex-bourbon stock, but they do a lot with finishing, with second maturations. They have just released a new distillery exclusive. It's also available online. So if you've got an address in Ireland you want to ship to, it can be done. Only 304 bottles of this. It's a 17-year-old single malt, 11 years in ex-bourbon casks, and then 6 years in ex-cognac cask. And that's released at 55.5% ABV. So if you're going to visit Ireland, you're going to visit the distillery. It's another distillery exclusive, and it's available online on their website. Just 300 bottles of that. I can't keep up with Teeling. I love their experimentation with wood, but they have so many releases. And so many of them look the same. The bottles look the same, that I can't separate them in my mind. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And I love what they do. I love what Alex Chasko, the master distiller, he's just an experimenter and a tinkerer. He plays around with things, and he comes out with some remarkable flavor profiles. Tough to keep up with, though, because they have hundreds of releases now. Hundreds. There is another Teeling whiskey then, and I tried this last night as well, and this became my new favorite Teeling whiskey. So this is a collaboration with Dick Mack's Pub, and it is an 18-year-old single malt which has been finished in Dick Mack's Imperial Stout casks and bottled at 51.5% ABV. Peppermint, menthol, green juicy fruits, wonderful creaminess, caramel notes to it. Really enjoyed it. 18-year-old single malt. You can actually buy that bottle from Dick Mack's, or you can buy it from Celtic Whiskey Shop. I think they have an allocation of it as well. Again, good high ABV, 51.5%, 180 euros. That's the territory we're in now for these whiskies, isn't it? Price point. There's no going back on price. No going back on it. But yeah, these 18-year-old and 17-year-old single malts, they command a good price. You're noticing a lot of price increases across the board, and certainly the older stock is going through the roof price-wise. There's been increases across the board from new make spirit from distillers to barley and malt costing twice what it did before to older stock now. I mean, the demand, the increase in demand for older stock, older single malts, older pot still whiskies has far surpassed projections. And so the rarity goes up, and with the rarity going up, so does the price, because there's fewer of those bottles available. So we're kind of suffering for our thirst with some of these whiskies. There's no doubt about that. Next up is not a whiskey, but it's worth talking about because it involves two whiskey distilleries that are doing quite interesting things, would be quite aligned in how they think, and it's a poitín. And a poitín is not just a whiskey that has not been in a barrel, but it is an Irish spirit. It's an indigenous Irish spirit. It's one of the three protected Irish spirits in law, in both Irish and European law. The third being Irish cream. So between Irish cream, poitín, and Irish whiskey, they all have what's called a technical file, or a document that governs how they can be made and what allows them to be called an Irish cream, an Irish poitín, or an Irish whiskey. And Killowen Distillery, which many of you will be familiar with, who released their first whiskey not 2 weeks ago, maybe two and a half weeks ago, they've teamed up with Blackwater Distillery, because the two distilleries, Blackwater in County Waterford, Killowen up in the foothills of the Mourne Mountains, have been doing interesting things with poitín over the past couple of years. And so let me put up the details of this exact collaboration, because there's an interesting conversation to be had, I think, about poitín. Let me pull it up here. I'll read it out to you. Okay, so where is it? It's here somewhere. Here we go. Now, it's not often we see kind of collaborations like this, but I would argue that Killowen and Blackwater, who you haven't heard a lot about yet in the United States, you're about to over the next couple of weeks. I'll talk about them in a second, but I'll read a little bit out for you here. So Killowen in County Down sent local Knockshee oats to Blackwater in Waterford. And in return, Blackwater in Waterford sent their heritage barley up north of the border to Killowen. They both went on to produce a poitín from the grain which was sent to them. So Blackwater made a poitín from the oats. Killowen made a poitín from the heritage barley. They then took the poitín that was made in both distilleries, vatted it together, and then split the final batch into two separate bottles. If you got a bottle with the orange label on it, it's technically the Killowen, or technically the Blackwater bottle. And if you got a bottle with the blue label, the light blue label, it's a Killowen bottle. But they're both exactly the same. It's exactly the same liquid. Now, the interesting thing about poitín is that it's having a bit of a renaissance, bit of a moment in Ireland at the moment. It's trying to find its way. Poitín is a spirit distilled from a grain, and it historically was barley predominantly, but they might have mixed other things in here. In this case, you've got a 50% barley, 30% old Irish barley, 15% oats, 5% peated malt, all mashed together. Well, not mashed together, all vatted together. But poitín is a spirit that came about really as a kind of an illegal spirit in the 1600s, 1660s, 1661 to be precise, when the British Crown cracked down and banned it completely, banned the distillation of it completely. It went underground, because up until that point, from the early 1600s to 1661, the Crown was blue in the face trying to collect taxes on the alcohol that was being made in Ireland, and nobody wanted to pay the taxes. People were just shooting their guns and firing stones and throwing whatever they could at the excise duty men who came to collect the money. By 1661, the Crown had enough and said, that's it, we're banning it, it's illegal. And so production went underground. And so poitín production didn't disappear, it just went to different places. You would see plumes of smoke popping up in the distance in different parts of Ireland. And those plumes of smoke might have indicated the firing of a still, the malting of a bit of barley, perhaps. It was illegal right up until 20 years ago. And it's only in the past 2 to 3 years that we started to see smaller distilleries start to play around with poitín. When Dingle Distillery opened up in 2012, they started playing around with gin. And gin, the Dingle gin, created a renaissance of gin in Ireland. So the poitín moment that we're having in Ireland that everyone from Mickle in Galway, Killowen in County Down, Blackwater in County Waterford, and on. We could list so many of them. Bawn Poitín from Ecklandville. So many of them are now being pushed onto the market. It's a chance for us to see, okay, is it time? But here's where we're stuck. And this is one of the problems with poitín, is that nobody knows where it fits. The big brands don't know what to do with it. Like, is this a sipping drink? Is it a cocktail drink? What is it? And every drink needs a mechanism so that we understand, so the consumer understands what to do with it. When you buy a whiskey like this, you sip on it. Typically, you might add a few drops of water, but typically you buy this particular whiskey to sip on it. When you buy Jameson at 2:00 in the morning in a college bar in Michigan, you're going to do one thing with it: shoot it. And that's what Jameson sells most of their product as, shots. So where does poitín fit? And I think I have the solution to it. I think I know where poitín should go. It should go into the fridge. It should go into the fridge like aquavit, like the Scandinavians, so that whenever we have somebody over, or we need to celebrate something, or we welcome somebody to our home, we take out the poitín and we pour an ice cold drop of it. Maybe it's even in the freezer, into a small little shot glass, and we should be doing shots of poitín as a kind of a celebratory thing, as celebrating a moment, not just to get drunk, but rather it should signify something. And I think that's where poitín could find its place. Now, if there's some reason why we can't put poitín in the fridge or the freezer, I'm sure the smarter ones amongst you will tell me very quickly in the comments. But I see no reason why not. I haven't experimented yet, but I'm going to open this with a chainsaw, because you can't get these wax seals off for love their money. Once I get a chainsaw, I will take this off and sip it, and then try it in the fridge and see. That could be it. That could be its solution. Ice cold. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think that. So I know how hard it is to get Irish whiskey on cocktail menus in the United States. Now with 700 different whiskey brands over the past 5 years, flooding the markets, there's only so much space on a cocktail menu, which is where volume happens. Cocktail menus drive volume in the United States. Otherwise, you have to find your route to market. What Dingle Gin did very cleverly was they created this big bulbous glass that people poured their tonic and their gin into, and people would be carrying this massive glass around the bar, and people would be wondering early on, what's that? And it was a kind of a conversation starter, big, massive balloon glass. So maybe that's the answer. We find our moment by throwing this into the fridge or the freezer. It might dull some of the notes if it was cold, yeah, no doubt. But then you take the likes of aquavit, you got there's wonderful caraway seed notes, and the grains and the seeds they used to make theirs. Now those would be more kind of herbed and more spiced than certainly poitín. But we'll give it a shot. The experiment will have to begin. No two ways around it. All right. Next up is a distillery that has been making a little bit of news, a little bit of wave, few waves in Ireland, and that is Curramore House, Curramore Estate Distillery. Curramore Estate is in County Waterford. A lot of things happening in Waterford at the moment. Waterford Distillery, Blackwater Distillery, and now there's going to be another distillery, and that's the Curramore Estate Distillery. Now, Curramore Estate is one of Ireland's largest private homes and private estates, 2,500 acres of private estates dating all the way back hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a massive, massive estate. And it is an estate that has been growing its own barley, that has been sending its barley up to the Great Northern Distillery as well for distillation. And they have been aging their whiskey in, I think they might be aging theirs in Great Northern, but they have stables and old outhouses that are being converted in Curramore into what is being touted as being quite a progressive distillery. I want to put up the details here because it's worth reading out. They are going for the, here it is, the green and kind of premium organic and carbon neutral distillery. I want to read this out to you, and I'll show you some more pictures. So they just got planning permission for a new organic carbon neutral whiskey distillery and visitor centre to be built at the historic Curramore estate. The distillery and visitor centre will allow Curramore Whisky to distill single estate pot still whisky on site and welcome visitors to Curramore to experience the whole whisky making process from field to glass. And it's a big milestone for the company, whose vision is to create organic, carbon neutral pot still and single malt whisky on the estate. The application was greenlit for the change of use of 5 existing 180-year-old agricultural buildings on the estate for industrial use. These buildings are of great historical importance. They're believed to be the first industrial farmyard to be built in Europe by renowned architect William Tinsley. And the buildings will be used for the distillation of spirits, retail use, spirits maturation, and ancillary use. The proposed development will include ground-mounted solar panel arrays and an integrated constructed wetlands treatment system and production water well. And it is the home of the Earl of Tyrone, Richard de la Poer Beresford. He's the founder and the managing director of Curramore Whisky, and they are very excited to start building there. So they're going to begin the production or begin the construction in 2023 with the creation of up to 24 jobs, and they'll have the capacity to produce up to 250,000 litres of spirit a year and receive 10,000 visitors per year as well. These are some renderings of some of their old agricultural buildings that will be converted. It's a massive, massive estate. And I'm going to try and take a visit down there soon. But it's really interesting to see the mixture, the meeting of old and new, the retrofitting and reintegration of agriculture. I mean, whiskey making is at its heart an agricultural process with a bit of obviously industrial mechanical process involved as well. But it's great to see these old buildings getting use. You've got so many derelict buildings around Ireland that'll never see life again unless somebody visionary decides we're going to do something new with this building. So I'm excited to see where this goes. The Earl of Tyrone, yeah, and he's a very nice fella. And his whiskey he has pot still whiskey that's not yet of age, but it has been sampled by a few of my friends at its maturing age, maybe 2 years, I think. And great feedback to it. Great feedback. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens here at Curramore. That's in County Waterford. So, yeah, there's quite a few distilleries that are approaching. Well, we're in the middle of this energy crisis, aren't we? We don't know where energy is going to come from. We don't know what we can rely on. We don't know what's predictable. There are certain distilleries that just cannot retrofit or cannot escape the use of oil or electricity that they have to buy in because they're in rural locations. But then there's others that are saying, well, we're going to build from scratch and try and be carbon neutral. We're going to try and capture energy. We're going to try and create energy. We're going to try and use natural resources where we can on site. And so we'll see a mixture of that. But the flip side of that is like the likes of Blackwater Distillery, their electricity bills have just doubled and are, I think, set to triple. And that's a huge issue for distilleries around Ireland right now. A distillery can't make whiskey without power. Just can't. Heat exchangers needed to run the stills, the fermenters, the washbacks. Everything needs power. And it needs power today when it can't make money on that power for at least 3 years. That's a huge problem. Huge problem. Because if you stop now and you turn off your stills at certain times, like during the day when there's peak energy prices, you decide to run your stills at night, what you're creating is a gap in your available stock in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, 5 years' time, because you stopped distilling. You couldn't do 2 distillations. You're going to do 1 distillation. And so that is going to affect them. So wherever we're seeing investment into renewable resources like solar, wind where possible, carbon neutral distilleries, that's a good thing. Middleton Distillery is just investing 50 million into making their distillery carbon neutral as well, and doing a lot with, for example, the spent grains, burning the spent grains in furnaces, using the heat generated from the furnaces to heat the water. There's a lot you can do with recycling and reusing the resources in the distillery, but it's an expensive process to retrofit. And not every brand would have the resources to be able to do it. Krista wants to know, are nobility titles in Ireland, are those left over from British rule? They are. Yeah, those would all be British hangovers. So sirs, lords, earls, those would all be British titles. And God knows we're not getting into a British-Irish title discussion and argument tonight. All right. Sonny Malloy's has another redbreast coming. As if things weren't expensive enough, Sonny Malloy's is releasing a new redbreast this week. They haven't shared publicly what it is, so I'm not going to share what it is because I don't think I'm supposed to. But let's just say that it's a little bit older than the last one they released, and I'll say no more than that. But Sonny Malloy's redbreast is a single cask that met with great fanfare when it was released. I think it was 2019, maybe 2019. I have a bottle up there on the shelf somewhere, and wonderful, wonderful sherry, Oloroso sherry cask, aged redbreast, single cask, which I think was 16 or 17 years, was the Sonny Malloy's redbreast. Anyway, they're releasing their one on November 9th. So what are we now? 6th. November 9th, there'll be a new Sonny Malloy's redbreast. So for those of you going to Ireland before Christmas, taking advantage of the weak euro and the strong dollar, or which way is it? The strong dollar, the weak euro. And in any case, that'll be available from Sonny Malloy's. I don't know if they'll ship to the United States. I'll find out. As soon as I find out, I'll let you know. If anyone wants to be we could do like whiskey, Duchess of Whiskey. Isn't there the Duchess of Islay? Doesn't she do all self-appointed? You could just appoint yourself a Duchess, Kristen. There's no, I don't think anyone will look for credentials. It can be an honorary title you bestow upon yourself. Okay, so we've heard in the last year that Redbreast are winding down their single cask program, mostly for two reasons. There is a limited amount of age stock available, and it's a tremendous amount of work to produce a single cask with all of the meetings that have to happen, the individual bottling lines have to be fired up, the labeling, the dry goods, the packaging, etc. has to be put together. It's not a hugely profitable or worthwhile pursuit when you're trying to grow the other ranges. So we've heard that the Redbreast casks are winding down. There must be a lot of them in the pipeline because they keep coming out more and more and more. But for Sonny Malloy's to have one in 5 days' time means that 2 years ago, they already organized it. So there are no more available for the moment anyway. And the United States won't be getting any single casks from Midleton anytime soon either, unfortunately. All right. Though that's the whiskey news. That's what happened in the last week. Imagine that, 1 week in Ireland. There was a time when that wouldn't have happened in a month. I've had to turn down the chance to be at a couple of things recently because there's another thing happening the same night. That never happened in Ireland before. It's a great thing. It's an amazing thing. So if I've missed releases, let me know. If you work for a whiskey brand and you're tuned in, let me know if there's upcoming releases. If you've got something coming, send it to me. Find me. You know where to reach me online. And we'll include it every week on the Shebeen. And we'll share the details of what's upcoming and what you want people to know about from your distillery or from your brand. But I'm sure I'll miss things in the absolute fire hose of releases that are happening at the moment. All right. This is a big event that is happening in 4 weeks' time, 4 weeks from Monday, tomorrow, in Cleveland, Ohio. It is the second annual Festival of Midleton Whiskies. Many of you will be familiar with it. It is being hosted by me and by Midleton Master Distiller Kevin O'Gorman. We're trying to raise money for Malachy House, an end-of-life charity in Cleveland that does tremendous work to give dignity and a proper burial and care to those who couldn't afford it or have nobody left behind to take care of them. Last year, we raised $50,000 that went straight to Malachy House. We're trying to raise as much, if not more, this year. And we are opening some tremendous whiskies in the process. And Kevin O'Gorman, the master distiller from Midleton, has been generous enough to fly over and open all of these whiskies for us on both nights. We have 100 places for night number 1, which sold out a few weeks ago, except for one seat. We have one seat left, and that one seat is available for raffle. I'll talk about the raffle in a second. Night number 1 is a fantastic night. Musical entertainment, Irish traditional music, dinner, 5 amazing whiskies, maybe 6 amazing whiskies I think that we've got that night. We've got Redbreast Kentucky Oak, we've got Redbreast PX, we've got Blue Spot, we've got Redbreast 27, we've got a very special sample drawn from a cask in the Midleton warehouse by Kevin O'Gorman and shipped secretly to its place of where it'll be poured in Ohio. It's going to be an amazing night. That's our first night. On night number 2, we're going to open a 47-year-old, $46,000 bottle of whiskey, the Middleton Very Rare Silent Distillery Chapter 3. We opened Chapter 2 last year. This is the oldest Irish whiskey to be ever opened in the United States. It's the first public tasting of it anywhere in the United States. There are only 20 places in total. We have only a few places left for night number 2. We'd love you to join us. If you are interested, go to festivalofwhiskies.com. Kevin O'Gorman will be pouring that Silent Distillery Chapter 3. There are only a few dozen people in the world will ever taste the Silent Distillery Chapter 3, and it's an extraordinary whiskey. I had the pleasure of tasting a small sample of it recently when we did an event with Kevin O'Gorman in the distillery. And when we didn't finish our whole sample down there that night, he said, Barry, take that away with you. This is the Silent Distillery Chapter 3. I'm waiting for the perfect moment to crack that open, maybe with a bit of Diet Coke in it or something tomorrow morning. But that is a big event, festivalofwhiskies.com, that I would love you to be part of. It's going to be a massive event. We have so many exciting surprises planned for both nights, for night 1 and night number 2. If you come to night number 2, you will sample whiskies, not only the 47-year-old Middleton Very Rare Silent Distillery Chapter 3, you'll sample Kevin O'Gorman's own whiskies that he has been responsible for bringing to market. Middleton Very Rare 2022, Middleton Very Rare Dargailloch Kylebeg Wood. You'll also sample a extremely rare sample of whiskey that he's bringing to share with you that I have never seen poured anywhere. Like, I have never seen it in Ireland. I've never seen it brought to any of the high-end events in Ireland. It is a spectacular drop, which when we shipped it to the United States, we were worried this better get there, because the value on this bottle that was shipped was unbelievable. So you're going to get something that has never been sampled in the United States on night number 2. It's going to be a tremendous night. There'll be a bit of a lock-in afterwards back at Gormley's pub in just outside Cleveland, Ohio. It's going to be a session. It's going to be a great night, 2 nights in Cleveland. Can't wait to see those of you who are coming. And again, we've got a raffle for 1 ticket that'll get you into both nights. 1 ticket. We're selling 200 raffle tickets at $100 each, and every single penny goes to Malachy House. And you can find those raffle tickets on festivalofwhiskies.com. Festivalofwhiskies.com. That's it, festivalofwhiskies.com. And there you can buy your raffle ticket online. Again, 100% of those proceeds go. That means we'll get $20,000. If we sell all 200 tickets, we'll have $20,000 just from the raffle that'll go to Malachy House. We'll have raffle on the night as well for signed bottles of whiskey from Kevin O'Gorman. We'll have great gift baskets put together, some swag, amazing things for raffling on the nights as well. But it's going to be a great night. 2 nights. 4 weeks to go. 4 weeks from Monday. 4 weeks from Monday. If any of you have a spare night, or are in the business where you might bring a client or entertain a client for night number 2 with a really special event that they'll never forget, reach out. We'll get you sorted with a ticket for night number 2. We still have a few of those left. All right. Brian says, going back to that Kevin lock-in with the barrel that was behind you two. Yeah. Imagine if samples from that showed up in Cleveland, Brian. Patrick wants to know if I have any clues what the next Redbreast American Oak series. I don't, but I imagine there will be a European one first. I would imagine there'll be a Iberian series before there'll be another American Oak series. So the last Iberian series release we had was the Redbreast PX, which then formed a series with Redbreast Listowel. Suddenly Redbreast Listowel was part of the Iberian series. So I would expect to see another sherry-focused Iberian series release before we'll see another American one. When is the raffle? That is a great question. The raffle is, I will find that out. I've been so focused on trying to move those tickets. I don't know when we're doing the raffle. Gormley's pub are going to be doing it. So I'll find that out and we'll let you know. All right. So that is our upcoming event. That's our last in-person event this year that we'll do. Okay. So let's talk about some club news, some Whiskey Club news. So for those of you who are Stories and Tips Whiskey Club members, just a few updates for you. If you're not Whiskey Club members, well, I'll share details with you anyway, and you might be so excited and interested that you have to sign up for our club. We've got lots going on and lots in the works, lots happening actually in the next 2 weeks in the Whiskey Club that I want to share with you. The first is our upcoming whiskey release. So the Cliffs of Moher whiskey, our collaboration with JJ Corrie, is bottled. The naked bottles are sitting shivering in the maturation room warehouse in County Clare, waiting to be dressed, waiting for their labels. The labels will be shipping tomorrow from, I think they're shipping from the UK tomorrow or Tuesday, and then they are scheduled to be labeled early next week. So for those of you who are not aware, we have a part of our Whiskey Club is we do collaboration releases. We do exclusive whiskies that are released just to our Whiskey Club that are not available anywhere else. They're not available outside the club. We look for interesting things, interesting stories, interesting people, interesting maturation, interesting elements that will give us a whiskey that we can not just drink, but we can talk about it. And I think that's important because when we talk about it, we need someone to talk to. So coming together around whiskey is always a good thing. This collaboration kicked off back in July. And this will tell you how long these things take to come to market. We should be getting a bit quicker from here on out. But this is our next release, the Cliffs of Moher whiskey, 3 single casks, 3 miniature single casks. They're only 50 litres each. And each cask has yielded us 70 bottles at 50% ABV. We brought it down from cask strength. We thought it should come down a little bit. 50% we thought was just right for it. 3 single casks, 70 bottles each, 210 bottles in total. We have more club members than we have bottles available. That'll often happen. But for those who want a bottle, we will be opening up a ballot on Wednesday. So let me talk about these 3 whiskeys. So we have for the first, so let's talk about some of the firsts. So our last whiskey that we released was the Craic from 2 Stacks. That was the first ever single grain, single cask release. And it was a 12-year-old single cask. And it was the first time ever a California-style Madeira cask finish was used in the aging of a single grain. So that was a first. With this, we've got a few more firsts. The first ever whiskies that were matured or spent some of their maturation, a finishing period on the Cliffs of Moher, the world-famous Cliffs of Moher, where they underwent, barometric changes in pressure, in moisture that really, really affected the maturation. It accelerated the integration of the spirit and the wood in a massive way. And it really, really brought more flavor out in a faster period than we could have expected. So we've got this first, which is the Cliffs of Moher whiskey. Nowhere else will you be able to get these first single casks, the Cliffs of Moher. The first single casks ever released from JJ Corrie, and the first ever single pot still released from JJ Corrie. So there's 2 single malts and there's 1 single pot still. They are, an amazing range of firsts. We will be shipping them directly from Ireland to you directly for about the same cost of shipping. It'll be about $25 in shipping to you in the United States, but we'll be doing it directly from Ireland. We will subsidize the shipping with your membership fees, and that way we can get whiskies to you faster as we go forward. So what's our timeline with these whiskies? November 7th, the labels are being printed and shipped. That's tomorrow, Monday. And then shipped to JJ Corrie. November 9th, we will open a ballot. So what we'll do is the only fair way, and I asked you all to give your feedback on this, but it seemed like the fairest way to do this would be if we have more bottles than we have members, and plus we have 3 different types of bottles, and some people want all 3, which isn't immediately possible. What we're going to do is we'll open up a ballot where you will register your interest in 1 or more of these bottles. If you just want 1, you'll tell us you just want 1, and you might tell us which one you want. If you want 2 or 3, you'll indicate that as well. We'll then leave that ballot open for 48 hours. We will hammer you with emails, Facebook posts, Twitter posts, Instagram posts, reminding you to enter the ballot, so that nobody can complain they missed out. We will put up a smoke signal, bat signal. We will hire pigeons. There will be semaphore with flags will be used to make sure you get a notice of these whiskies. And then we leave the ballot open for 48 hours. And then on November 11th, what I'll do is we'll close off the ballot. We'll see, do we have all of the whiskies allocated in the first round? If not, those who indicated they wanted a second bottle, we'll put you into a ballot and we'll pull out your names. That way, we'll fill all the bottles. I think it's the fairest way. There's no other way to do it. We couldn't get, if we took those 3 casks and we bottled them in a manner where you got a sample of each. Let's say you got 3 200 milliliter bottles or 3 250 milliliter bottles. So you got to sample each one of them. Then only 70 people would be able to sample all 3, right? Like, isn't that how it would work? Or would you get more? No, you'd still 200 people would get to sample it. But I think that with 2 things came up. One was JJ Carey couldn't get hold of dry goods like the bottling like that. And the other was, it's just logistically so difficult for us to do it. It's just so difficult for us to do it. So that came out. Kristen wants to know what order we did them in New York. I will go back and double check. I believe it was, the pot still was the second one, I think. But I'll come back on that. Yeah. And I'll get all the tasting notes. I'll get all the details put into the ballot so you know which ones you're going for. The goal is to get these as cheap as possible to you. So really you're getting some of the rarest single casks ever. The only single casks ever to come out of JJ Carey. First ever pot still. And they're bottled at 50%. So we're trying to get them to market at $89. That's our goal. There might be another $1 or $2 between now and when we can open up the online ordering on the 21st. We're still working that out on the shipping side. So that's our goal, which, considering excise duty, everyone has to make their money along the way, fulfillment costs, shipping costs. I don't know how we're even getting it out of that price, but we'll get it out at 89 or as close to it as we possibly can. So November 15th, all the bottles will be dressed. The neck label, the main label will be applied. They'll be shipped down to our fulfillment partner in Cork. And then we'll have our online ordering. So we're building an online ordering system on storiesandsipps.com, which will be open to club members. So if you're a club member, you'll be able to add your bottle to your cart. If you're not a club member, you won't be able to. And then we will double check. We'll have a bit of a system in place to try and prevent abuse of people trying to order more than they're allocated. With any system, there'll be bugs and there'll be somebody who makes a mistake and there'll be somebody who misses out first time, and we'll work with everybody. We won't ship anything till we double check, triple check the list. And then on the November 21st is the goal to have online ordering open on storiesandsipps.com. And it'll be a online web store, just like if you went to colognewhiskey.com, just like if you went to dingledistillery.com. We'll have our club whiskies will go there from here on out. If we have a release where we have 600 bottles and they don't all sell out immediately, they'll stay on our club shop and you can order them anytime. And that way we'll over time develop an online, fairly fluid, forgive the pun, catalog of club whiskies that are only available to club members. Then by the end of the month, end of November, before we go to Ohio, we'll do an online tasting with JJ Carey. Unless you get thirsty and open it first. You can if you want. You don't have to wait. But we'll do a tasting with Louise and with myself. And and with you all. We'll have some fun with it. I'm really excited to try them again. I've tried them 1, 2, 3. I've tried them 4 times and they've been different every time. And now I want to try them finally in their bottled state. So I'm looking forward to it. All right. See, this is very clever, isn't it, John? John said after he started off with all the expensive announcements. Pure marketing here. Start off with this is $300. This is $180. By the way, we're bringing the JJ Carey whiskey to you at the knockdown price of $89. Oldest trick in the book, isn't it? Oldest trick in the book. Brian Sharp wants to know if there's any update from O'Shaughnessy on our cask. No, there's not. And I was thinking about it during the week, and I need to reach out to them and get an update. And we'll bring Brian Nation on and have a chat with him about our cask. We'll get him to do a sampling. So I'll add that to the list. But I haven't heard anything on the cask, so we'll get those details. All right. And then coming soon, our next whiskey. Look at you all zooming in. What is that? What can you see there? Our next whiskey will be announced soon, and it'll come right on the back of once JJ Carey is launched. I expect we should be able to announce this before Christmas, and it's not out of the realms of possibility that it'll be shipped before Christmas. If not, it'll be early January. Those casks have not been reused, Jeff, yet. They're still, those casks are still empty. They're sitting there. She hasn't used any of our, oh, you mean the 8? No, they haven't been used either. They're going to be blended away. Or the other, how many was there? There was 7, 8. She's going to actually use them in a blending project. She's not actually going to release them as single casks. And there was there was a private release in Ireland this week that used a similar style of cask, but it wasn't a Cliffs of Moher. It wasn't a Cliffs of Moher release. You can all take your screenshots if you want and zoom in. 9 total. I have no news on the whiskey bus next. It's absolutely impossible to get to it. Work-wise, Anthony and I, we can't get to it. We can't find. We're doing our. If the last one landed in the perfect time for us to be able to focus on it, we both had gaps where we could take the time and actually focus on it. But with the travel, with the events, with the whiskey club releases, with the auctions, it is extremely difficult. And distilleries are flat out, and it's a very tough time to be organizing it. So we have nothing at the moment, nothing. We will do our best, but we have nothing to report at the moment, as much as we'd love to. There's just a logistics issue. We don't have the resources. We don't have the people. We don't have the people to be able to do it, sadly, to be able to plan it fully at the moment. But we're going to do that as soon as we can. Nobody's getting it right with their guesses there. Nobody's getting it right. You can guess away all you want. A couple of other updates for you. We had a great Meet the Maker event in our club this week. So our Meet the Maker events, for those of you who are not club members, our whiskey club is designed for, it's aimed at the United States. It's aimed at Irish whiskey fans who want to go deeper into the world of Irish whiskey, who want access to exclusive whiskeys, exclusive casks. They want to meet the people behind the whiskey, and they want to learn more about how whiskey is made, and they want to connect with the people in the Irish whiskey community. That's what the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club is about. Every month we bring interesting people who are makers. They may be producers, they may be bonders, they may be marketers, but they're making things in the world of Irish whiskey together. This week we brought Sir Maurice O'Connell to us to talk about his journey with Wayward Irish Spirits, to share some details and some behind the scenes information. But also the Meet the Maker events, which are private Zooms for our members, allow the videos to be opened up, allow the microphones to be opened up. And it was great to see members this week opening up their microphones and talking directly to Maurice. Where else can you do that and chat directly to the people behind the whiskies? So that's what these Meet the Maker events are for. Open up your microphones, ask questions of the makers. We'll share their story. They'll share their story. We'll share a drink with them. So the replay of Maurice's event will be up online by tomorrow morning. It was a great event. We went on for an hour and a half after he signed off chatting that night, but it was a great night. And Maurice shared some great nuggets of information. Like, I asked him a question about his upcoming release. Why is it aged 3 months in ex-bourbon barrels and 40 months in ex-Bordeaux wine casks? And he said, because the wine cask didn't arrive in time. Simple little nuggets like that you might not get elsewhere, but it answers the question on little details like that. So that was our Meet the Maker event. Our next Meet the Maker event coming up yet in November, we're going to meet Jack McGarry, the founder of the Dead Rabbit, and Mark McLaughlin, who is the director of Irish Whiskey, newly appointed director of Irish Whiskey for the Dead Rabbit. And the reason I want to bring the lads in from the Dead Rabbit is because they are embarking on 2 big things. One is a solidification, is that a word? Solidifying of their Irish whiskey program for not just New York, but for their expansion. So they're about to expand in a big way. They're going to Texas next. They're going to Austin to open up their next location. They're not taking the whole Dead Rabbit to Austin, but rather the downstairs. They're leaving the parlor. The cocktail room is just a New York only piece. But that pub element, the downstairs of the Dead Rabbit, is going to Austin. They're going to replicate it in New Orleans, and they've got plans for many, many more locations, dozens of locations. Jack is a process fanatic. Mark is a whiskey fanatic. Mark writes for Stories and Sips. He's been, we're working on some things together at the moment. Stories and Sips is working with the Dead Rabbit on some things that we'll announce soon. But we're going to bring the 2 lads on with us at the end of November to share their perspective on the Irish whiskey industry and how they're thinking about curating their Irish whiskey program, which will be one of the most observed and studied Irish whiskey programs in the United States. So I think that'll be really interesting to chat to to chat to the two lads. So they'll come on end of November. We're just waiting on a date for that at the moment, and we will nail that down. So that's our next one. Then we've got, coming up this week, we've got a great interview being dropped into the Stillhouse area, which is our members-only area of the Whiskey Club on the website, storiesandsips.com. Deirdre O'Carroll is the blender. So when you enjoy a bottle of Jameson's new single pot still, or Redbreast PX, or Redbreast Kentucky Oak, you have Deirdre to thank for putting that composition together. So Deirdre works with Billy Lighton and Dave McCabe. The three of them make up the blending team. Deirdre is also responsible for stock management in the distillery. Imagine that, projecting stock and inventory needs for 40 years out. 40 years. She's got a spreadsheet that if the formula breaks on it, we're all in trouble. Deirdre did a great, shared with us some great insights. I interviewed her during the week. I have a great interview. She came to us live from the blending room in the distillery, and that interview will be dropping into the Stillhouse area of our website this week, which is a great insight, again, going behind the scenes to learn a little bit, not only about how she does her work, but why she does it a certain way. I was very curious to get to the why behind her decisions. The style of whiskey that drives her might surprise you. You'll hear that in the interview. It's really entertaining. And also how she remains objective in her composition of whiskies, knowing that she prefers a certain style or a certain finish or a certain maturation herself. It's really interesting. And Deirdre is a rock star in the distillery. So that's an interview that's dropping on our website. Again, that's the Stories and Sips Whiskey Club member interview. And then you may have missed last week, we dropped in an interview with Carol Quinn, the archivist, the historian from Irish Distillers, who is responsible for the history of Jameson, the history of Powers. She was responsible for the history of Paddy, but she's overall responsible for the history of the Bow Street Distillery, the Middleton Distillery. And Carol was sharing why Jameson have the right to bring out a single pot still for historical reasons. And it's a really entertaining interview. Carol is a absolute source of the most amazing stories you'll ever find in your life. And Carol has the human stories to back up every whiskey and every product and every marketing campaign that goes out of Irish Distillers. So those are available on the website at the moment. If you're not a member of the club, well, why not? If you're in the United States, we'd love you to join. Storiesandsips.com/club. If you are in as a club member within the next week, you'll have your chance to be in the ballot like anybody else for our whiskies, and get access to all of our interviews and all of our Meet the Maker events. And then every whiskey that comes out, you have a chance to be part of each of those releases. Jason says, boy, I've missed a lot. Yeah, honestly, there's so much that when I sat down to put together what goes out in the week for our newsletters, I realized so much of this gets missed by people because there's just maybe too much going out sometimes, but we want to keep sharing things. We want to keep putting things out into the market and into the club. So we'll have more interviews like that we'll do with really interesting people. So some will come on for a Meet the Maker event. Others might be able to spare some time at 3:00 in the afternoon where we'll just record a nice 20-minute interview and ask them some really specific questions that help us understand how they make whiskey or why they do a certain thing. So that over time, the Whiskey Club becomes this, not just where we get exclusive whiskies, but a treasure trove, a library of interviews, of events, all recorded, all archived, all put in there. So if you bought a bottle of Waterford whiskey and we did an interview with Ned Gahan, the head distiller, you could go back in, watch that interview. Maybe he talks about some of the notes that are in Heritage, Hunter, Variety, Single Malt, and all in there for club members. Mark asks, what's the lineage on the Dead Rabbit whiskey he sees on the shelf? Is that the shelf with the lads back here? Because I don't think I have any Dead Rabbit whiskey on my shelf. No. All right. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot goes on. But anyway, if you've missed anything, it's all in the website. Like, go to the club area of the website and see the different sections. It's updated almost daily. And maybe it's tough to keep up with it, but we're adding to it all the time. And honestly, you could download some of these things to listen to as podcasts. We've got our History of Irish Whiskey podcast in there. You could listen to these interviews. You could download them, or just listen to the audio, put the YouTube on, the video on your phone while you're driving, and you could be listening to that as well, listening to the conversation. So they're all in there. They're all in there. I'm Steve. I'm not sipping on anything because I'm too busy talking. And also, if you're not part of our Facebook group, so we have a almost 10,000 strong Facebook community called Irish Whiskey Fans of America. I'd love you to join it because there's great crack in there every day. Lots of great conversations happen. People planning trips to Ireland, people asking for feedback on certain whiskies, people sharing their tasting notes. You can search for Irish Whiskey Fans of America on Facebook, or you can just type irishwhiskeyfans.com. It'll take you directly to the group. And it's worth joining. We've got a good crew in there. Shame about the moderators, like shame about the admins, but apart from the admins, it's a good group. It's a good group. Lisa said her head is spinning from all the updates. Yeah, there's a lot in there, but we want to keep at it. We want to keep at it. But I am still, the whiskey that's still in my glass is worth talking about. So some of you might know that I host and produce the Waterford Whiskey Podcast, which we just wrapped up season 2, and the last episode will go out tomorrow. And season 2 is all about the Arcadian series. Let me take this off the screen here. The Arcadian series of whiskies. And the Arcadian series of whiskies is a range of 4 different whiskies that were released over the past 6 months from the Waterford Distillery that are focused on what's called the old ways. Arcadia was a kind of an old Greek, going back into historical times, a Greek region, Arcadia, where everyone was focused on doing just what they needed to survive, to live. They had methods that were passed down from generation to generation, and they didn't need to innovate beyond what worked for them and kept them happy. I think a lot of the Mediterranean people still live the same way. But the distillery wanted to go back and see what were the old ways of how whiskey was made in Ireland. And aside from different mash bills, what about the production methods? Were those different? What about the growing? What about the barley itself? Was that different? And so going back 5 years, they embarked on this journey, starting with the identification of dormant seeds, old seeds, heritage varieties of barley that had been grown in Ireland, that had actually been cross-pollinated, crossbred, developed in Ireland, actually in East Cork, near the Middleton Distillery, actually in a place called Ballinacurra. That was the home of barley breeding for the British Empire back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And there was a barley variety that was developed there called Hunter. And it was developed by Herbert Hunter, Dr. Herbert Hunter. And he was a biologist and a farmer. And that was a barley variety that grew for quite a few years until more commercial approaches to agriculture took over in Ireland and around the world, where there was more mouths to feed, there was a need for more efficiency, there was kind of an industrialization, a commercialization of farming. And so there was also changes in climate and things like that started to affect barley. And there was pests that you wanted to, suddenly you could apply pesticide and herbicide, and all those things changed the barley and the resilience of the grain that was being grown. And so over time, barley became pretty homogenous. I mean, today, something like 80% of distilling barley in the world is all the same variety. Whereas Waterford wanted to go back and find, well, what was it like in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s? And they found a small little bag with 50 grams of grain, 50 grams of barley in the seed vault in Dublin, which is a Department of Agriculture building where they have stored drawers and drawers and drawers of old seeds. And what they did is they took the 50 grams of grain of barley and they planted it. They sowed 50 grams. They harvested it the next year and they replanted it. They harvested that the next year and they replanted it. Over the course of 5 years, they were able to go from 50 grams of grain to 50 barrels of whiskey, which is what this is. It's a heritage Hunter variety. One single farm grew this variety, which was Tom Bryan in Donaghmore in County Kilkenny. And he grew this heritage variety in a very specific way, kind of unknown, really. You had to kind of monitor it daily. Things like the barley would grow too tall because it wasn't being kind of. It was a variety that used to grow very tall and it used to fall down in the rain, and then when the rain went away, it used to spring back up. And they were discovering all kinds of unusual things. They were worried that it wasn't going to be resilient to pesticides, to herbicides, But in any case, they grew it, and they have released this whiskey as one of the releases in the Arcadian series. There will be 2 other heritage grains, Goldthorpe and Old Irish, which were also bred in Ireland and have long since gone out of fashion and out of production. So they're being brought back as well. So this is the first release, and it's got that unique Waterford DNA. There's that minerality, but there's a sweetness to this one that I haven't detected in other Waterford whiskies, apart from a cuvee where they marry together a number of different single malts. But there's a sweetness on the nose that, for the first time to me, is kind of a dark, almost like a dark red grape note that not overpowers, but maybe surpasses the minerality note that some have said is a bit kind of salty, bit almost maritime-like or umami. Yeah, it's a lovely drop. Very enjoyable drop of whiskey. Look out for this one. That's heading to the US. There was 10,000 bottles, I think, in total. 50 barrels. That would be right, wouldn't it? 200 bottles approximately a barrel. 50% ABV. I'm going to put up here I'm going to put a link in here to the terroir code. So every bottle of Waterford whiskey has a code on the back, and it is what's called the terroir code. And when you type that code into the website, you get the specific information for that barley, for that whiskey. You get the name of the farmer, you get the shoes he was wearing when he was, you get the color of his shoes, you might get the size of his shoe, you might see what color t-shirt he's wearing, the license plate of the truck that picked up the barley. It goes on and on and on. They have a sound cloud of the birds singing in the field where the barley grew. Everything you never knew you needed. I'm going to put in the code. I'm going to share it with you. All right. HE01 E0101. Okay. I'm going to paste this link into the comments here. And that should pop up for you on YouTube and Facebook. People are joining me from all over, different places. But have a look at that link anyway. It's really worth checking out because the amount of detail that they go to. So maybe we can put it up here all together. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, we'll share a tab. Here we go. All right, so this is the page you get. Heritage Barley Hunter 1.1. Donnoch Moore, Tom Bryan. Matured for 1,161 days, or 3 years, 2 months and 6 days. Shows you where the farm is. Information on the site. Look, here's a SoundCloud. If we play this, you'll hear the farm. It's the barley blowing in the wind. Birds, bees. And then here, look at all the detail you get here on that particular whiskey. When it was sown, when it was harvested, when it arrived at the Barley Cathedral. All the dates you want. Who are the distillers on the day? And then the terroir. Look, the soil. You can see the soil in the field. I mean, for the data nerds, it's all here for you. Spirit profile. Have you ever seen so much information on one release? There's all the barrel compositions. It's the same barrel composition for almost all their whiskies. Anyway, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Let's hear more about the peated Waterford, says Mark. All right, we can hear more about it if you like. This will save you listening to 8 episodes of the Waterford Whiskey Podcast. 2 peated Waterford releases that are peated. Ballybannon and Ballykill. What's the other one? Put it up here. 2 Waterford releases. I'm going to put it up. I have them both here. I'm going to one of them up here. One of them's downstairs. Let's pull it up on their website. We'll talk about them. Okay, so the 3 different releases then were the heritage variety, of which Hunter is the first one. The second one is the organic and biodynamic. So first ever organic whiskey, Irish whiskey in the world, first ever biodynamic whiskey in the world. And these are the organic Gaia and the biodynamic Luna were released. And then the third release is the peated whiskies. So let me see. It's not on their website for some reason. Here we go. It was Bally, I should know this, Ballybannon and Fenniscourt. So 2 farms in County Carlow. And so these are the first whiskies that have been released in Ireland in a generation, made 100% with Irish barley and made 100% of turf or peat from Ireland. So any peated whiskey you have been getting up until now has not been Irish peat. Any peated Irish whiskey has not been made with Irish peat. Why? Because the facilities haven't existed to be able to do that. There are small, like Irish craft malts who can do it in very small quantities, but no whiskey I don't think has been released using from their experiments yet. So Waterford were the first ones. Now they couldn't peat it in Ireland because there weren't the facilities to peat it. They even tried peating it themselves. They tried building the smokers. They tried building the maltings to do it. They couldn't do it. So what they had to do is they had to send the peat to Scotland to maltings in Glenesk, where they were malted and then sent back, where it was smoked. The Irish barley was sent with the Irish peat, and it was smoked. It was malted there and then sent back for distilling in Ireland. Now that'll change in time, maybe that Ireland can scale up, but right now there isn't the facilities to do it at that scale, because they need 75 tons of barley to do a distillation, and you couldn't get 75 tons of malted barley peated in Ireland, unfortunately. So we have 2 releases anyway. 2 releases, Ballybannon and Fenniscourt. This is the Ballybannon. So I'm going to pour a drop of this. Again, nice youthful whiskies. Peat likes a youthful whiskey. Peat takes smoke, likes a younger style, I think. I'll never get used to these glass stoppers. This will go flying across the room now and knock over a dream cask. So this is the Ballybannon. So just like 3 years and 3 and a bit years old, about 3.5 years old. And they're very light, kind of lightly smoked, but they go in at a higher ppm than like Ardbeg or Lefroy. It's like 58 ppm. So very dry, very ashy up front. Very, very ashy up front. And then get a lovely hint of sweetness. Ashy going into a kind of a sweet smoke, kind of mesquite, barbecue, sweet kind of barbecue, almost like barbecue if you were smoking a fish, maybe. Kind of lovely minerality that we're used to with that Waterford distillate. It's still a Waterford distillate underneath it. You still get that minerality, but you lovely ashiness up front, and then moves into a sweet smoke, kind of a medium length to it. Really enjoyable. I'm still new to the peat game, and I'm working my way through as many peated whiskies as I can to start to kind of separate the flavor profiles. But Irish peat is, I mean, peat from anywhere is different to peat from anywhere else. It has its own terroir, and what you need with Irish, or what you need when you're peat malting, you need wet peat. You don't need heat. Heat will kill it. Heat will kill the barley. What instead you need is you need smoke. And so in order to get smoke, you have to be burning very wet peat, very wet turf. And so there's certain parts of Ireland have wetter turf than others, but also Ireland isn't set up to be extracting wet turf. So as we mentioned on the podcast, when the lads from the distillery were going around to peat farmers in Ireland and asking them for peat and saying, we want the wettest peat you have, they said, we don't have wet peat, because everything they take out, they dry on the side of the road, or they dry it in sheds for burning, for fuel, for heat, and for fires. So they were very surprised to get a request for wet peat. Anyway, they got hold of some not too far away from the farms, from in a place called Ballytygue, and they were able to take that peat, with the barley from the two farms, send it over to Scotland, and then bring it back to Ireland. Okay, let me see. Go back to look at some of your questions there. Okay, some of you referring to an episode of something. James wanted to know, how did a lad from Cork who admitted he had no great interest in whiskey 10 years ago wind up neck deep in whiskey? I don't know, James. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. This is getting awful expensive. The yeah, we do have too old. Can't tell if some of you are asking me questions or you're asking each other questions, but it seems like you're having your own. Tag me if you want me to answer the question there anyway. I'll see what I can do. So yeah, so that's those are the water whiskey. So look, that's kind of the lay of the land with the Shebeen. Is kind of, we're going to go through the what's coming up. We're going to go through what's happened in the world of Irish whiskey. We might sample a whiskey or two, and if somebody has a request for me to take one off the shelf and sample and talk about it, happy to do that too. It's not a screensaver behind me. It's a working shelf, so we can do that too. And if there's things you want covered, we're happy to do that. But we'll save our interviews and our guests for our club chats, for our Meet the Maker events, and for our interviews. And then we'll do a recap once a week on the Shebeen, and we will continue our kind of illicit drinking. We shouldn't be drinking at 1:30 in the morning in Ireland, or should we? What else should we be doing? Jason said, Brian asked, there was talk when Boan did the 10 old mash bills that the club would be able to buy 2. Yeah, Brian, we have 2 casks of those maturing right now. We have 2 of them maturing, and we're not sure what to do with them yet. So Boan Distillery, they distilled a number of mash bills that were old mash bills from going back to the 1800s, 1900s, and they distilled what would have been pot still at the time, and could be pot still by the time these whiskies mature. But we got 2 casks. We picked up 2 casks that we've got them in storage, and we may decide to bottle them as club bottles, or we may do them as cask shares. It's not clear how we'll structure that yet. I'm trying to think about how we might do that in conjunction with everything else, and what might be the best way. So they won't be coming of age for a while, and so I'm not sure if we'll do something with them before they come of age, in the sense of we just divide them up with the club members, or we release them as our own club whiskies when the time is right, So that's we've got a list now of casks. We've got a number of casks that we've picked up in different places that we haven't talked about, and we won't kind of share all the details all the time, but where there's a maybe good value to be had, or something interesting, or somebody that we want to support, we might buy a cask. And so we've got 5 casks that are hidden around Ireland at the moment, and we'll try and get some more. And the goal then will be to work out how to get those into great releases. We might do some unusual things. We might go to JJ Corrie with a cask at some point and say, listen, let's do a blending project together. Here's one that we don't know if it's worthy releasing on its own. Let's blend it, and let's do a kind of a custom blend. Maybe that wouldn't be a Boan mash bill, but it might be one of the others. So things like that. So I haven't really figured it out. James wants to know if I heard any news on the Jameson pot still. James, yes, we have a whole episode covered just on Jameson pot stills. If you go to the YouTube channel, which you're on at the moment, and click on probably 2 videos ago, you'll see an entire night on all the Jameson pot stills over the last few years that you can go back and check out. I sipped on the Jameson pot still and Dingle as well last night, and it was my last whiskey of the night. I enjoyed it. Jeff wants to know if there's any updates on the progress of the technical file being approved by the Department of Agriculture. There's no update at the moment. There is a recommendation has been made by the Irish whiskey industry that has been submitted to the Department of Agriculture to expand the definitions of Irish whiskey, and that is being reviewed at the moment, and it is most likely going to be rubber stamped, but it's just a timing issue. So Soon as we know anything about that, we'll talk about it. But it'll mean that there will be more leeway within the categories, certainly of pot still, to be able to call a whiskey a single pot still. For those that, I'm still in two minds as to whether the fight that's happening on this is the fight that's worth fighting for. Because whether it says pot still on the whiskey or on the label or not, it's still the same thing inside it. And I don't think that there's the same awareness of pot still that we think there is out there. However, change is good and evolution is good. And I just wish it was a little bit easier to get things changed where needed, because there's a lot of time being taken by distilleries lobbying on this and working on this and complaining about this. So there are a few whiskies that are maturing right now that have been distilled around Ireland that will not fit the category of pot still if they were released today. But if the file gets changed and rubber stamped when they do get released, they will fit the file. So, for example, all of the Boan mash bills are not technically compliant today as pot still, but the hope would be that in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, whenever we want to look at releasing them, they will be compliant. And likewise, you've got Blackwater Distillery about to release the first 4 pot still, non-compliant pot still whiskies. They're going to release 4 200ml samples. I mentioned that on our Meet the Maker event. We'll have more details on that in the next week. They're releasing whiskies that in time they hope will be compliant, so they can say single pot still as opposed to just Irish whiskey, non-compliant pot still. John asks for any chance of a Stories and Sips advent calendar. Not a hope. The work that it takes, there isn't a single retailer in Ireland has the ability to put together an advent calendar. Not one. The undertaking is enormous. And they'd be about €400. They were priced out by a retailer recently who was trying to put one together. And it would cost about €400 to get an advent calendar made and shipped to the States, which is unbelievable. Jason wants to know if I know anything about Wise Owl whiskey from Listoke Distillery. To the best of my knowledge, there is no whiskey made or released from the Listoke Distillery. So if they're releasing, I don't think they're a whiskey distillery themselves. I don't think they're a whiskey distillery, are they? They're a gin distillery, aren't they? Listoke. They may be releasing a sourced whiskey. They've not popped up on our map now. Wise Owl whiskey. Award-winning Irish whiskey. That's a new one for me now. I don't think they made it. They're a gin shop. They have no mention on their website. It looks like it redirects. Do they have it on their website? Listoke Drinks. There it is. Wise Owl Whiskey. I don't think they made it anyway. I don't know that they even have copper pot stills for or whiskey stills. I think they've got just gin stills, to the best of my knowledge. They're good at marketing anyway. I'm also realizing we have so many opportunities and potentials for casks, club casks, etc. I suppose it falls on me sometimes to recognize what can and cannot be logistically pursued, So there's a lot that we're doing at the moment, and I'm trying to figure out what's the right cadence. Is it whiskey releases? Is it casks that we do bottlings from? Do we take shares in the casks? We're kind of working through some modeling on that at the moment. But the goal is over the next 12 months that there be at least 10 releases. That's the goal. 12 months, 10 releases. So we're trying to lay the groundwork now that we can move from one into the next, one into the next, one into the next. So maybe that's Grace O'Malley. Maybe that's the Liberator. Maybe it's Ecklandville. Maybe it's others. Who knows? There's conversations being had in many areas. So we would like to do 10 interesting releases over the next 12 months, which would be kind of trying to model ourselves on the Scotch Malt Whisky Society from a whiskey perspective in terms of having regular, they call them outturns of whiskey. But I want us not to be a retail shop. They're like a retail shop with a bit of content here and there. I think us getting together to chat about the whiskies is just as interesting as the whiskey itself. So we got to time all that. How does that all fit in? How do you tell the story, share the story, get the whiskey put together? So bit of a juggling act at the moment. Andrew, I wore this turtleneck just for you. Winter now, like. Damien asks, is there a concern that in expanding the technical definition, you undermine the core pot still market? So the argument that's being made is that the pot still market, and let's be honest, is a tiny, tiny part of the Irish whiskey market. We're talking single-digit part of the Irish whiskey market, is in itself a minuscule part of global whiskey. We think it's well known. It's not. We have to stop fooling ourselves thinking people know what pot still whiskey is outside of people who tune in to things like this or spend their lives in whiskey groups and blogs, etc. Also, the pot still category as it is today is itself a very new defined category. In fact, it was only in the 2000s it was fully defined as it is today. And it was only defined based on what Irish Distillers was producing. Why? Because they were the only pot still maker in Ireland at the time. The way they defined it was representative of how they made it. In other words, we make it this way, therefore that's how pot still whiskey is made technically. What it didn't account for was if more distilleries came and said, hold on a second, you yourselves, Jameson, used to use oats and rye when you made your pot still whiskey. Powers, you used to use oats when you made your pot still whiskey. Newer distilleries are saying, well, hold on a second, pot still whiskey itself was a mixed mash bill, and it wasn't just 5% of something, it was 30% of something other than barley. So that's the argument, and it's a legitimate argument. I wouldn't argue with that argument. I just think that it's time to start promoting pot still whiskey. I think Jameson releasing a pot still whiskey starts to move the needle a bit. A brand with the name power of Jameson suddenly slapping single pot still on a label and bottling a style of whiskey that regular Jameson drinkers may not have ever encountered. And it might be something for them to step up to. It is a good thing. So I don't know that it undermines the core pot still market. Bear in mind that the best-selling single pot stills in the world are Redbreast. And only 100,000 cases, I say 100,000 cases of Redbreast were sold last year. There was 14 million cases of Irish whiskey sold last year. There was only 100,000 cases of Redbreast. So that market is small, small, small. It's not to undermine it or to be critical of it, but rather to say that I think it's okay that we expand. I just wish it was done quickly and we could stop infighting in the industry and people pointing fingers at those who are agitators and just get it out there. It just doesn't look good for the industry that we're constantly fighting about it, I don't think. That's just my 2 cents anyway. All right. There's Jamie now. Look, a man on the inside. Hinch brand ambassador. Hinch whiskey brand ambassador. He said he'd be lucky if 2% knew what a pot still whiskey was this weekend. See? That's the sad truth. Most of my shelves behind me are pot still whiskey, yet most people don't know what a pot still whiskey is. We'll change that, won't we? Jamie's out there flying the flag for Irish whiskey. Good man, Jamie. He's on a European tour. He hasn't been home in weeks. All right. So that's it, folks. Sinead, that's it for our Shebeen. Smaller, kind of more condensed, get everything in on a Sunday night. No 4 hours of 16 whiskies and horizontal by the end of it and liver damage. So Sinead, hopefully enjoy the Shebeen and you'll tune in again next Sunday. If you can share this on YouTube, you can share it on Facebook, you can send it to your friends, you can watch a replay. They're free, they're always available, and we'll do on every Sunday. Now, one of the Sundays in 4 weeks' time, we'll be in Cleveland for it, so we might do a quick Shebeen, maybe with Kevin O'Gorman. You never know. We might involve Kevin O'Gorman in it because we'll be there on the night. So we'll see how we go. And that's it. So thanks a million for tuning in, and we'll see you on our next Shebeen, and we'll see you during the week for chat about our ballot for the Cliffs of Moher whiskey. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks, everybody. John loved the format. Chris loved the format. Great stuff. I love the format. Woo! It's a win. So on to everybody.